I feel like Mission Impossible music should start playing. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, make a new cell. So what I'm going to give you is some Play-Doh and some yarn. Actually, I'm going to have each of you go over to, there's a pile right behind Lane and Chloe of yarn. You will need 4 individual pieces of that yarn. So go get yourself 4 pieces of yarn. While you're doing that, I'm going to give you Play-Doh. So your assignment post is called Making a Cell, the movie. It doesn't have to be like live action. We're not talking claymation. You don't have to direct anybody in this. You don't have to. You're going to do a docery video. You're going to have all the pictures you need from today's activity that we're going to walk through together. You're going to then put them into a docery tutorial. You're going to record your voice talking about what you're seeing and talking about the steps. And your little presentation has to answer the questions that are in that piece of paper that's attached to. So the attachment that you have is going to tell you everything that needs to be in your final product. You're going to have to use that Play-Doh sparingly because it's going to make all the cells that you're going to use today. And we're going to start off, I'm going to tell you that you need to make a diploid cell. And I'm going to tell you that the diploid number for this species is 2. So I want you to make a little, well, what do we have to make with a cell first? Well, we have to make something that separates what's inside the cell from what's outside the cell. So what would that be? Well, so the cell membrane is just the boundary that separates what's inside from what's outside. You should take pictures of your own on your desk. So you make a cell membrane, and I just said this cell, you don't have to take a picture of this if you don't want to. This cell has a diploid number of 2. So make your chromosomes and then see if you get what I get. Do you have something that looks like this? So this is a diploid cell for this species. How many total chromosomes does it have? 2. How many pairs of chromosomes does it have? 1. It's got 1 pair. There's 1 present in each. There are 2 present in this pair. So the diploid number is 2. So diploid number 2. 2 chromosomes. Now, we said that anytime one of your cells dies, you have to make a new copy of it. Anytime that you have an injury or a wound or anything else, or just because, cells die, stuff dies, your skin cells die, your heart cells die, your muscle cells die, you have to regenerate those. So we're going to go through a process, and the goal is to come out of this process with 2 new cells that are identical to this, 2 new diploid cells. So what do you think the first step in that process is? You go ahead and take a wild guess. I'll do it up here, and then I'll show you what I've got, and you can see if we're on the same page. Step 1, what happened? I didn't split anything. I copied my DNA. Because if I'm going to end up with 2 new cells that have all the same DNA as the original, I have to make copies. Now something else has to happen. I got to form chromosomes. And so those little pieces of DNA that have been copied get pinched together in the middle. And now instead of chromatin, we actually have our chromosomes. And for anybody who cares, the little structure that joins them in the middle is called a centromere. You don't have to know that, but it might be useful. So now we have chromosomes. That's good. We're good. What's step 2? So step 2, those chromosomes line up down the middle of the cell. They line up, but they're not done. Because you know what happens? They break apart. They break apart and they start to move towards opposite ends of the cell. They move to opposite ends of the cell. Yep. They move to opposite ends of the cell, and then guess what happens? This is so easy. Ta-da! What do we have? 2 new cells. Diploid cells. Do these look just like the ones we started with? Let's go back. Hey, look at that! 2 new diploid cells. That's easy. Now, somebody last year, or the year before, I forget, said, hey, we had to learn, I mean, there are names for all these steps. There's telophase and anaphase and metaphase and blah, blah, prophase, blah, 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 blah. And so he said, we had to learn all these last year. I don't care if you know all the names for all those steps. It doesn't matter here. And somebody said, I wish you'd have told Mr. G that. Well, you know what? I can do this because Mr. G made you learn all those. So we're just kind of refreshing and reviewing that there is a process where we can make 2 brand new diploid cells. They're identical. They got the same number of chromosomes as the cell we started with. Do you remember what this process is called? Man.
Where's my kid's book?
Mitosis. And I will tell you that the completely unglamorous mnemonic that I have been using to remember that for the last, 30-some years is my toes itch. Toes have nothing to do with sex. That's how I remember it. Don't judge my mnemonic, and I won't judge yours.
Hey, what cell doesn't say they're sisters?
We can make new diploid cells. But we're interested, remember that tomorrow is Gamete Day.
I can't wait.
I know! I'm so excited! I hope it's not anticlimactic. I hope you enjoy it as much as we usually do every year. I think you will. So we need to make gametes. Are gametes diploid?
No.
Heck no! If gametes were diploid, what would happen? We wouldn't have any babies because there would be too many chromosomes and the instructions would all be all messed up. So we have to have what kind of cells? Haploid cells. So we're now you can now take one of your little cells that you've just made and you can set aside your chromosomes and set aside your string because we're going back to 1 diploid cell. So we got to take this diploid cell and somehow we got to get haploid cells. The first couple steps that we're going to do are going to seem oddly familiar. So what's the first step? Copy the DNA. Form chromosomes. Doesn't it seem like we just did that? It's up to you. There's probably a benefit to going through the process. Oh. So, we had the diploid cell. We want to make haploid cells. First, we copy the DNA and we form chromosomes. This doesn't look any different than mitosis. But something weird's going to happen next. What freaky weirdness is this? What? Exactly. So, I don't know if anybody really knows why. But during the process of making haploid cells, those little chromosomes sidle up to one another and they hook their little arms and legs around one another. Sometimes they wrap up 1 or 2, we don't know. This is called crossing over. It's the arm twist thingy. Strange. Very strange. So here's the unfortunate part. Here, I need a volunteer. I mean volunteer. When they disconnect, they often exchange little bits. Isn't that freaky? So now we've mixed up the chromosomes. What this does is it actually makes new genetic combinations. And we'll talk about how you can have a kid who has maternal grandma's hair and maternal grandpa's nose. So they cross over, they uncross, and then they separate. They separate, and, oops, first I'll do that. Okay, so the chromosomes unhook, they kind of move to the opposite ends of the cell, and guess what? Hey, I feel like we did this before. Get your other piece of string ready. What do we have? Well, wait a second. What do we have here? What do we have? How many cells? Are they haploid or diploid? Are they? let's go back to the diploid cell we started with. There's the diploid cell we started with. Are those haploid or diploid? Those are diploid. Now, are they identical to the diploid cell we started with? No. What's different? They've got those little weird colored ends. So we're not done because we don't have haploid cells yet. Now, this is the part that's a little easier. Those individual pieces of DNA, those strands, now move to the opposite ends of the cell. Can you guess what happens next? So those little pieces of DNA moved to opposite ends of the cell, and then we formed 4 new cells. 4 new cells. Are those new cells haploid or diploid? Haploid. 4 new shiny haploid cells. They're not really shiny. So, the process of making haploid cells, anybody remember what it's called? Meiosis. You got it. This is meiosis. So meiosis makes haploid cells. And we get 4 haploid cells out of every 1 cell we start with. We start with 1 diploid cell, we get 4 haploid cells. And we get a variety. So if we look back at our original diploid cell and we made a new diploid cell out of it, 2 new diploid cells, and they're identical. There's been no exchange of information. There are no new genetic combinations. Remember that, you know, one of these chromosomes came from yo mama. It was the maternal chromosome. One of these chromosomes came from yo papa. It was the paternal chromosome. Well, now when we've made these diploid cells, you have a mixture of traits from mom and a mixture of traits from dad on the same chromosome. Oh, we're shuffling the deck here. We're shuffling up the distributions of characteristics. Variety is good. New combinations are good. That makes the species better able to survive stuff. So we have 4 new haploid cells, 4 gametes. There are 2 processes. In females, we see the making of eggs. In males, we see the making of sperm. So sperm production is called spermatogenesis. Genesis. I can never spell Genesis right. There we go. And you may be familiar with the word Genesis. Creating things, Genesis, making stuff. There's a biblical allusion there. Egg production, this is one of my favorite words in all of biology, though I probably will spell it wrong, is oogenesis. Oogenesis, because ovum, all those things relate to like ovaries, ovum, and oogenesis. Isn't it fun to say? Don't you want to just go home and say oogenesis? You don't have to, but your parents will probably worry about you a little bit if you do. So now that we've made gametes, now that we know how this happens, we can take gametes and we can make a baby. So tomorrow when you come in, you will get your gametes, and by the end of the period, you'll have a baby. Aww. Some people said they weren't ready for parenthood. Don't worry, this kid doesn't eat much. Very easy to maintain. Oh, did I mention the buck teeth and the oil glands? You'll see. It'll be fine. Huh?
I can't have a child.
Well, wait till tomorrow. So anyway, that's where we'll leave it off. And I would like you to put all your string when you're... Now, make sure you've got all your pictures, because the little movie presentation that you need to do, you'll need those pictures. Let's look at how to record in Doceri, okay?